Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another live episode of Teachers for Teachers. That's you, moms and dads. I'm Dr. Dejana, and again, I'm here with my fellow colleague, Dr. Leah. Hello, Leah.
Hello, Dr. Dejana. We have a really fun show today. I am excited to hear more about the background, but Wilson Singh, who is our guest, is a fellow at Encorps, and that's an organization that helps people transition from professions to teaching. And he has a PhD in aeronautics and astronautics from MIT. He also has a very rich resume, and he is currently a middle school teacher. So I'm very excited to meet him.
Absolutely. And Wilson is guided by a few very, very key belief points. Two of them: students don't care how much I know until they know how much I care. Oh, that hits me right there, right in the heart.
Yeah.
And then also, students are inspired by teachers who are lifelong learners. I love that, right? Oh my gosh. So before we get deep into our discussion, I'd love to introduce to everybody our panel that's joining us for today. How's that sound, Leah?
Sounds right to me.
All right, so let's welcome back Mark Riddle. Dr. Mark Riddle, say hello.
Hey, good to see you all this time.
Mark has degrees in music, theology, and sociology and works at West Coast University. We also want to welcome back to the panel Anne McMullen. Say hello, Anne.
Great to be with you, Dejana. Thank you.
Anne is an accomplished and respected education consultant based in Los Angeles. She's the project director of COSIN Empowered Superintendents Program and author of Life Lessons in Leadership. So happy to have them to help join us as we learn more about Wilson's journey into education. Wilson, welcome.
Yes, and Wilson, I think like the most pressing question from me to start us off is, what inspired the transition for you from industry into the classroom? And you are muted, so here we go.
Let's check the audio first. Is it okay?
Good. Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. So I was volunteering at my kids' elementary school at that time. Must be 6 years ago now, maybe even 7. They were in the 3rd grade, I believe. I was doing a program called Project Cornerstone. Some of you might have heard of it. I think it's a nationwide project. So I was telling these stories in the classroom, and I felt a connection with the student. And at the time I was in between jobs. So I talked to my wife and I was like, hey, maybe there is what should I call it? A path for me in education, because even when I was in industry, I called myself a facilitator of shared learning. But in industry, nobody understand this. Like, what do you mean? We just want to put products out in the market and make lots of money. What is this thing about shared learning? But I always enjoy that. So there was some discussion, and then when I get the green light from my wife, I said, okay. So what I did then was I started volunteering at other school, mainly a high school, because I want to see what the different age groups are interacting. What is like interacting with different age groups, and the more time I spent in the classroom, the more I was convinced that that could be a rewarding second career for me. So I applied to a credential program here in Northern California, got accepted, and as they say, the rest is history.
So you've been teaching now for 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, this is my 5th year at Cabrillo Middle School. We are located about 45, 50 miles south of San Francisco in the Bay Area.
Well, there are first of all, I mean, the PhDs from MIT, very impressive, but even more impressive is that you were wise enough to get your wife's approval before you moved forward on that career change. Is she also a professional woman, or is she home with the kids?
No, she's in medical devices. So yeah, it really makes a big difference when you have a supportive spouse. It makes a world of difference. I'm very lucky.
Mhm. Very nice.
I wonder, my turn. I wonder, so I'm super impressed because I'm a science teacher and I wasn't always a science teacher for the longest time. I was a professional marine biologist. And like you, I had the opportunity to interact and teach some kids. And I realized that I really enjoy the educator part to inspire that fire for lifelong learning a lot more than I enjoyed spending time in the lab writing research papers that maybe a select few would read. And but I noticed that I did take a lot of stuff from my professional life and I use it in my teaching life as an educator. And so I really wanted to ask you, what are some things that you think that translated from your professional life into your profession as an educator?
I teach and during the regular school hours, I teach Algebra 1. So I feel that with my first career, I was able to connect what we learn in the classroom about Algebra 1 in Algebra 1 to real world applications. And I think a lot of students appreciate that. And because sometimes you get the math teacher usually get the question, when am I going to use this? And usually I could come up with a good answer, but sometimes I also have to be honest with them. There are quite a few areas and topics in K-12 mathematics curriculum really, in my opinion, and some other educators also feel that it's kind of outdated, is that, really, I like one good example that people like to make fun of is, solving quadratic equations. Like whoever need to solve quadratic equation. I never had to solve a quadratic equation after I left high school. But nevertheless, students spend a lot of time factoring, trinomials and stuff like that. So I need to be very careful how I answer that question. When am I ever going to use it? I don't want to be too. I just want to be realistic about it. And some people would argue, well, that's just the training of the mind. So you really shouldn't worry about application. So that's one thing I feel like that is beneficial for me to have had a prior career before I became a teacher.
How does the school environment in terms of the collegiality, how does that compare to the time in industry?
Uh, First of all, at Cabrillo Middle School here, I've come across really dedicated colleagues. They are all very friendly. When I first showed up, they all offered to help me, with little things, how to fill out a form, whom to call, and little things like that. But in general, it's just a very supportive um, environment. The one key thing I noticed the difference between a school environment and for lack of a better word, corporate environment is in school. As teacher, we always talk about helping students succeed, right? We need to give students more than one opportunity to learn. But oftentimes in the corporate world is very cutthroat. I don't know whether there's a better word for it. It's like, well, we need to launch a product, period. Go figure it out. And so in that way, I do see a very different in the corporate world. It's all about delivery. You set a goal, you have to meet it. If not, then there's consequence. But in education, as a teacher especially, I need to make sure that the bottom line is my students need to learn what they're supposed to learn. If they need more than one chance to get it right, they deserve that second or even third chance. And I think that's to me is the biggest difference, is that you need to be more forgiving in a educational environment.
Mark, I wondered if you had any response to the need for math when you finish school, given that you work in research and.
Yeah. Well, no, I was reminded though of when I took statistics as an undergrad, it was from, people who used them in research, but really couldn't explain them at all. And so I came out of these stat classes going, well, I can do it as a recipe kind of thing. If the problem looks exactly like this, then I could perform this test. But when I went back to school, in my 40s, the class was taught by an actuary. And he could come into the classroom and say, the reason we would want to do this kind of thing is because people behave in this way and we want to test this kind of thing. And the whole thing just came together for me. I just, all my intuitions about the way things should work mathematically worked. So I think, Wilson's experience, with actually having to solve problems using whatever tools were at hand, like mathematics, for example, material science, that kind of stuff, does lend itself to inviting students into the picture. And so that's, so I wish we had more folks who were bridging that gap, coming across from some kind of, practice where they had to solve problems that weren't predefined the way that a lot of educational problems are framed.
I love that you bring up that critical thinking and problem solving. And I get excited when I meet other educators that have come from a real world situation where they were faced with, non-prescribed situations and they had to do some creative thinking. I wonder, Wilson, if you could speak a little bit to that in the classroom on how you can encourage the young people to be creative and critical thinkers, and how that's, super important, in the career, but just super important to engage in that as a lifelong learner.
Sure. One thing that I learned when I went through my teaching credential program about teaching mathematics in the 21st century is dialogue is very important. I need to give student opportunity to talk about mathematics in my classroom. So when we're meeting in persons, I arrange my desks, my student desk in my classroom in groups of 4 or 5. So they will be sitting facing each other. And I would like them to talk about mathematics. I would like them to solve a problem together and not to rely on me telling them the answer. So for example, sometimes when I walk around the room, my students would say, "Hey, Mr. Sang, is this right?" So I have learned that my response should be, "Well, maybe what do your table may say?" So to encourage them to have that agency among themselves that they are problem solvers and there's nothing wrong with guessing and checking. So that's one way I learned to encourage that practice so that they don't always have to rely on the teacher to tell them what the right answer is. And the other thing I learned in my credential program is there's a fine line between, uh, let's see, when I was a student, right? The way was the teacher show us how to do a problem, and then we do another 5 problem, very similar to what the teacher just showed us. So it's really a practicing procedures, if you will. And I've since learned that, you know, things that can be solved by executing a procedure, we don't need humans anymore. Computers, machine do a lot better than we can. So I've come to believe that that's the wrong way. That's the wrong impression to give students that mathematics is all about regurgitating procedures the teacher taught in class. It's more about understanding the concept and be able to apply the concept to problem that you've never seen before. So sometimes in a test, if I give them a problem they've never seen before, and some of students, I say, "Hey, that's not fair. You never showed us this problem before." And I was like, "Well, go home and ask your parents who are in STEM, do they go show up to work and, solve problem that they've seen before? And there's a good chance that, they are solving problems that no one else has ever solved before. So it's a delicate balance because I teach seventh graders. So they do need a lot of scaffolding, but at the same time, I wanted to feel that, to have the confidence that they can solve problem that they've never seen before. They shouldn't be scared of problem that they never seen before.
I just want to applaud that. As one who taught seventh and eighth grade for 18 years, I understand what that age group is like. And I think, Wilson, what you bring to the table beyond the math, your real world experience, and the opportunity that you are giving your students to collaborate, to communicate with each other, to do creative problem solving is invaluable. And it's really where we all need to be today in education. And I think a lot of that comes from your prior work experience, that you had to work in that type of environment. So what a gift for your students. And thank you and your wife for letting you go through that process and do that. So that's terrific.
So, so it sounds like you paid a lot of attention in your coursework, but it seems like there were probably things that you had to unlearn about working in this kind of environment, or maybe harder lessons to learn, to make it in the classroom. What kinds of things? Anything stick out in any of those categories?
Yes, definitely. I love instructing. I love explaining things. I mean, I can go on. And I remember even early on, I love helping my friends solve problems. But I realized that telling someone what to do step by step is not the best way to help them learn. The better way is to ask guiding questions so that they do their own thinking. Because if I just tell them what to do step by step, I am doing the thinking, not the student. So the toughest thing for me is to give up the joy of just purely instructing. You should do this, followed by this, followed by this. Voila, that's the answer. Isn't that great?
Mhm.
That's I might feel good about that, but that's really no use. It's no good for the students. But doing it by helping someone learn by asking only guiding question and not telling them the answer is very, very difficult. First, it takes a lot longer. And sometimes even the student doesn't have the patience to go through some. In fact, it happens to my own son. It's like, Dad, just tell me what to do. I want to, finish this and go play basketball or something. So it is one thing that I have to unlearn, is that I am not the one that's supposed to do the thinking. It's the student.
Thanks. That's a powerful lesson to learn.
And it's very much in keeping with the way we do a lot of professional development, and one of our mantras is basically that all of those jobs that are follow the instruction jobs are going to be done by machines in the future. So we need critical thinkers and creative thinkers, and those things do not happen easily.
Well, and for too many years, it has been that it was the teacher in the scenario that he described. The teacher was doing all the doing, not the students. And what we need to have happen is that the students are doing the doing, because they've got to prepare for that real world life that's coming at them. So, and I do also agree with both of you on that. If it's just a simple step by step, there are machines that can do those things, and we just have to learn how to program those machines and make them do the things that we need them to do. But it's very powerful. Congratulations on the work you're doing.
So what's next for you, Wilson?
Well, let's see. I am 55, and my wife and I was hoping we could retire before we turn 60. So I'm thinking maybe 5 more years. And this is my 5th year. I'm basically halfway through my second career if everything works out. I just love learning. Um, in my current position, besides being an Algebra 1 teacher in a middle school. I'm also part of an organization called the 49ers STEM Leadership Institute. So what happened is when the 49ers came to Santa Clara, they moved, for those who follow professional football, they moved from San Francisco to Santa Clara. And when they got here, their foundation uh, wanted to give back to the local community. So they wrote a big check to the my school district to establish the 49ers STEM Leadership Institute. And we provide after school activities for students. That's what I was doing before 4:30 today, student doing online robotics programming. And I love being in this position because now I can basically do a lot of different things. So I learned robotics. I learned digital fabrication using laser cutters and 3D printers. And come next spring, I'll be doing some work on data science. I wanted to help students be more data literate, and maybe even do some programming to do data science. And I knew a little bit about statistics when I went through school, but I get to learn data science myself first before I teach my students. So I just love the constant opportunity for me to learn new things. So the other thing I'll be learning for well, it depends on whether we get back in person. We got a grant to bring in some drones into our school. So I'll try to figure out how to use the drones to teach STEM and programming. So the way I see it is just so many opportunities to learn. I might not end up retiring at 60 if I'm just having too much fun. I would just keep going if they allow me.
I
Well,
have a feeling they will.
That seems to be the case sometimes with lifetime learners. Retirement is like, there's always more things to learn, more things to do for sure.
And did you have something?
yeah, I would love to talk about having to learn new things. Teachers all over the country have had to learn new things, as Dejana knows certainly very well. I just wonder, Wilson, because I'm assuming everybody's remote at this point. Is that how you're teaching with your students right now?
Yeah, I'm sitting in an empty classroom right now.
Yeah. If you had one, two, or three pieces of advice for teachers who have had to move from in-person teaching to remote teaching, how do you make that work? How do you keep the students engaged? What's working for you? I know there are a lot of challenges, but do you have one or two things that maybe we could share with others that are working for you as you've learned in this remote learning environment?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on your student population. I happen to teach two very different group of student population. One group is in an accelerated math track. They they are very savvy with technology. They have good family support. Um, and for those students, is really the transition is to for me is pretty smooth. They know how to operate a computer. They have high speed internet connection in their homes. They have their own bedroom so that they can have a quiet environment for them to participate. So for those kind of students, really, I worry about in terms of keep them motivated is I need to compete with distractions in the the video game, the YouTube and stuff like that. So I need to find ways to interact with them, like using apps like Pear Deck and Padlet, so that I get some feedback from them. And then there's the other end. I'm also teach a support class for English learners. Um, some student I didn't see them for 2 weeks when we switched because they didn't know what to do. They had to pick up a laptop from the school district. The parents might not have time that first week to do that. So for that student population, it's just a lot of patience and being willing to slow down and not beat myself up, because it's no use for anybody. Um, so that's really what I've learned so far.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing exactly what you do in the classroom, which is meeting the students where they are, right? And providing that. So that's terrific. Thank you for sharing that.
And what about to parents, Wilson? What advice would you give, since you are both a teacher and a parent, as is Dejana?
Yeah, I have to confess that I don't think on the parenting part, I don't think I'm really getting the handle of it. I remember both of my wife and I have boy-girl twins. They are 10th grade this year. I remember when especially this school years, when they started out the whole school year in distance learning. Every day I get home, my son will be playing video game, and I was like, "Don't you have homework?" And I said, "Oh, I'm all done." So I don't know quite how to fight that battle because I mean he's getting A's and B's, so I really can't fault him on that. Part of me wish that his teacher would give him more work to do. But being a teacher myself, sometimes I understand that maybe my son is okay, maybe some of his classmates struggle with the current workload. So again, I don't want so that's I never, email the teacher and complain, hey, how come you didn't give my son enough work? He's playing video game every day. So I understood I shouldn't do that. So so as a parent, I struggle. It's like, so is he really understanding everything he need to understand? And sometimes when he looked at his homework, could he have pushed himself a little harder? But I've learned the hard way that sometimes if I step in and say, hey, no, this is not good enough, do more, do this exercise for me, this math problem for me, then it will make him absolutely hate math. And I don't want to do that. And so I had to learn to let go as a parent. um, as a teacher, I have to say I've been very fortunate that I have very supportive parents. I feel like that I I I've kept my student challenged enough that so far I haven't heard from any of the parents as, hey, why didn't you give them more work? And so it is tough. As I said, being a teacher and parent, sometimes I find myself arguing with myself.
Well, I think the advice that you just gave to yourself is great advice for the rest of the parents, and that was to sometimes just let it go, I think. And the fact that your son's getting A's and B's. My children are adults, but when my son was in high school, I came home one day and was upset about the amount of video game playing, and my daughter, who was a couple of years older than him, said, Mom, I think you should give him a hard time as soon as his grades drop below an A. And I think her logic was pretty sound. And there are so many young people these days making a lot of money in the video game world. So I have to not think back and realize that maybe I shouldn't have given him quite such a hard time about playing video games.
That debate continues all across this planet Earth. Video games, for sure. I struggle with the same thing, but my kids throw it right back at me. Hashtag lifetime learner. Mom, I'm learning all of these independent skills and teamwork and collaboration and critical thinking. And who told them that? Oh,
right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do think that the advice to parents is really just let a lot of it go right now. Try to make sure they're keeping up with their schoolwork, but also this is a very different time, and there are all kinds of ways to learn outside of the formal learning that takes place. So maybe it's just some family walks to look at the full. And Dr. Dejana introduced me to an app on my phone that I'm now taking pictures of plants all over the place, because it then tells me what the plant is. I'm so excited about it.
For sure.
And this has been such a fascinating conversation, but we are at our half hour, Dr. Dejana.
Oh my goodness. Well, what can I say? Thank you so much, Wilson, for joining us for this really cool conversation about, teaching, educating, and, just being a human and a parent. what do you do? Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Mark. And as always, Leah, we always enjoy our time together. For
Yeah.
you that are watching, we hope you join us next time because this episode is over, but please join us for our next episode of Teachers for Teachers. That's you, moms and dads. Thanks for
Thanks
watching.
so much.
Thank you for hosting me. I really enjoyed it.